Good evening. Can you all hear me? Could you please take your seats? Please take your seats. The voice disembodied and otherwise said. Get your last drink and take a seat. All right, I know some of you will probably pack in a couple of drinks, right, Michael Lotus? I see Leo's hanging out in the line. Yeah, that's okay. Let's double up with bartenders. Let's get 6 bartenders back there right away. Maybe some self-service. Welcome, everybody. Now, all of you in the drink line, I'm not going to cut you off, but please understand that a member of the Chicago Tribune Editorial Board is always used to having the full attention of everybody. My name is Tillman. I'm the CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute, and I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. It's a great night to talk to one of the most important writers on politics and public policy in the state of Illinois. We have some real problems, and there's nobody that knows better how big those problems are than Kristen McQueary. I'd like to also thank the Union League Club for having us here, and David Cohn. I don't know if David's here tonight or not, but David does a great job of running the public affairs operation of the Union League Club. One of the best clubs in the city, and certainly the most robust public affairs program in the city of any of the clubs around. They all have kind of a unique thing, but that is what truly makes the Union League Club different. I was just down on the 4th floor at the Rendezvous Bar having a pre-engagement cocktail with one of our board members, Steve Brown. He tried to get me to do a shot, and I said no. I didn't think that would be a good idea before I got up here with a microphone. Mark Lennon, how are you? Wave to everybody, Mark. Mark was just on our radio show that we have every Sunday at 3 o'clock, Illinois Rising, on WIND 560 AM, Sunday afternoons. But I'm going to just kind of get right into it, if you don't mind. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kristen McQueary. She's a Southside Irish girl. Is that right?
Correct.
And we really like to make Southside Irish girls feel comfortable. So I have someone here to help me with that.
Oh, goodness. Nice. Thank you. Perfect. I mean, normally it's Busch Light, but I'll take a Heineken. Step up.
Well,
out of the bottle.
You're north of Roosevelt, so you get a Heineken.
Oh, I feel very out of place.
That's right. That's right. Kristen is a rising voice for balanced journalism in Illinois. Her areas of focus include government, politics, education, and candidate endorsements. We're going to spend a little time talking about candidate endorsements tonight, Kristen. But before joining the Chicago Tribune Editorial Board, she wrote a political column for the Sun-Times News Group's Southtown Star. How many of you knew Kristen from her Southtown Star work? How many of you were familiar with her there? That shows you why that paper is struggling, and she's so much happier. She's so much happier at the Chicago Tribune, which is raking in the cash every day. She also covered the State House for Chicago Public Radio, which survives on taxpayer dollars, and Chicago News Cooperative, a nonprofit or some sort of thing associated with the New York Times. I'm not sure about that. Did I have that wrong?
No, that's correct.
That was pretty right, wasn't it? Yes.
That was correct.
So I have some prepared questions here that my colleagues at the Illinois Policy Institute prepared, and I prepared a few. But what I'm going to do is just sit down, and the way this is going to work is we're just going to have a little bit of a conversation, or some people might call it an interrogation, where I will get to ask the questions of Kristen, and she will have to answer them. Now, she's a reporter. She's used to asking questions, so this is going to be very, very fun. We'll do that for a period of time until you look like you're bored. The first time I see somebody nod off, I will throw her empty beer bottle at you, and let's hope I hit the person nodding off and not the person next to you. And then we'll open it up for a question and answer. And when we do that, there will be a microphone. Who will be the microphone holder? Oh, wow, there's Judy. See Judy over there? You cannot miss Judy. She's the life of the party. So be sure to find her when you have a question and wait for the microphone so that everybody will be able to hear you. So, Kristen, first of all, I just want to say, what's it like to sit in that awesome boardroom at the Tribune Tower where Colonel Robert McCormick used to hold court? I've been there, as you know, and it's a beautiful wood-paneled room. And when you walk in there, do you feel the history of Colonel McCormick there and all that the Tribune once was and shall be yet again?
I appreciate you saying shall be yet again.
Yes, I'm more optimist here.
Yes. No, it is never lost on me that I'm walking into this wonderful institution, and there are First Amendment quotes, carved into the walls, and where the boardroom is, has beautiful dockets. When you're standing outside the Tribune building and you see all the beautiful balconies, that's where we sit, and my seat at the editorial board table happens to look out onto the skyline. No,
Why'd you get into journalism? Why journalism? You know, it's not really known for its high compensation.
Well, a lot of people do things they like not to get paid well. But
That's not what the left thinks. The left thinks we're all about the money.
No, you know, I think I got into journalism because I'm just a naturally curious person, and I started working at my college newspaper, and, you know, you could assign me a story about property taxes, or, you know, how do sewage systems work, or night cops, which is what I originally started doing, chasing, you know, the scanner around, going to fires and accidents. And
So that sewage system thing, that's a crappy deal, isn't it? Sorry, you just have to go with that. Let's turn our chairs a little more like this. We can turn to each other, but the people on the sides can see you.
So you want me to go this way?
Just turn a little bit out.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, this is good. So, what's the most interesting story you've ever covered?
Interesting?
Controversial, surprising, however you want to take that.
Well, when people ask me, like, what stories are the most impactful, they're not really the stories about politicians or, you know, breaking news on what Congress is doing. The time that I spent covering the police beat in Peoria, I was having to knock on the doors of parents who lost a child, or be at the scene of an accident where teenagers were, you know, drinking too much, and the parents show up at the scene. I mean, those are things that stay with you for life. So I always revert back to those stories as being kind of the most impactful. When I was at the Southtown, I did a lot of work transitioning onto the political beat, where when Mike Madigan was running candidates, I would go knock on their doors. I would check their petition sheets. I would try to figure out who was a fake candidate and who was real. You know, kind of getting behind the shenanigans of politics, I would say.
There's shenanigans in politics?
I would say you have no idea, but I know that you do. So I will not say that.
I'm sadly all too aware of the shenanigans in politics.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Speaking of the shenaniganer of the city of Chicago, Mayor Emanuel. Now, he's been at it now for 4 years, won re-election, and so things are going great, aren't they?
They are going swimmingly.
So
The city is just coasting into a new era of success and financial stability. You didn't know that?
I seem to be vaguely aware of a gigantic billion-dollar-plus budget deficit, depending on whose numbers you want to take. The ones they put out, which are wrong and lies, like $500 million property tax hike, but the real number is like $2.5 billion. What's the end game here?
You know, I wish I could say that the end game is that we're going to right the ship of government, and once we all write our big property tax checks, you know, we're going to get to a point where we are going to raise the structural deficit, which is what the mayor is promising. But I
Did you say raise or race?
Erase.
Oh, okay.
Erase. That's
We've
what
been
he's
raising it for some time. I'd like to stop doing that.
Right, I know. I really have gotten to a point where I just don't have a lot of confidence in one-party rule government, regardless of which party it is. And, you know, I thought maybe when the city's rating kept dropping that would be a wake-up call, and they would stop borrowing money. I thought maybe when new aldermen were seated this year, there were 13 or 14 freshman aldermen, and they all ran on, you know, not being a rubber stamp to the mayor and not borrowing money and, you know, righting the ship. One of the very first votes they had was to borrow more money. This was in June. They had just been sworn in. Only one freshman voted against it. So I don't really have a lot of hope that the city will eventually get on the right path. And in fact, I have a column that's posting, it might be up now, that just questions, you know, I think most taxpayers like myself who live in the city, I understand it costs money to run government, but you cannot keep asking me for money if you have not delivered serious reform. And he hasn't done that. And he promised it as a candidate in 2011. I don't think as taxpayers we should keep having to wait for someone to make dramatic change in their second term. I think you should deliver on your promises. And he didn't do that in 2012, 2013, 2014, and I don't see it happening.
Some people describe. That's your first applause of the night.
No, this is nice. I don't get it.
That was pretty good.
Keep it up.
No,
Okay.
do you know how hard it is to get applause on somebody who just does a riff on public policy?
Wow,
That
that's
is
so true.
hard.
That's
This is
true.
not, of course, all these guys, we're all dweebs. We know that. We're all way on the tail of the bell curve. That's why we're here.
I think the open bar helps. So
The open bar helps.
If we start to get boring, just
There you
please
go.
drink more wine.
Now you're starting to go to your community routine. I like that.
Stop that.
Yes. So let's shift a little bit to further shenanigans and incompetence. Springfield. So Mike Madigan and the Democrats had had monopoly control for a very long time. And you referred to one-party rule. I call it monopoly. You know, it's the game of monopoly where you always lose if you're the taxpayer.
We're just doomed. So I'm glad. Oh, geez. I'm glad that he's holding out, but it does concern me that by holding out, the people who need government services the most, that 10% who aren't covered by a federal court order or they're not in AFSCME, those, the social service agencies are the ones who are getting pinched, and they always get pinched. They are always in Springfield begging for more money because the legislature would rather, deal with CME Group and Sears. When they asked for a tax break, that actually came into a special veto session. The legislature will come into special session for big corporations. These are democratically controlled legislature, remember. They will call a special session in order to approve a tax break for a big corporation, but they require social service agencies every year to come and beg for money. So the holdout, I'm glad, I'm okay with where we're at, but I'm worried that in the end I don't want to see the most vulnerable get squeezed and some of these agencies go out of business.
Well, I think I've been asked this question a million times, and my answer is that people who are impatient with the status quo, the current situation, have lost sight of how amazing it is to be in this situation, and especially with the arbitration bill that the veto was just sustained a week, 10 days ago, whatever it's been now. I think if Governor Rauner wasn't there, the capitulation would have already happened without any reforms. So by just being in this spot, I think we're in a better place. I'm going to go with a couple. We'll come back to some serious things, but I just want to ask you a second. Who do you think is more important to the circulation and thus the financial health of the Chicago Tribune, you or John Cass?
Okay, that is an easy answer, John Cass.
Oh, John Cass happens to be here tonight. John, wave to your fans.
I have to say, John Cass has been kind of the lone fiscally conservative voice among columnists, and the city doesn't have many. So my homage is always to John Cass because he's really been a lone voice for many years.
And he's very, very powerful.
He's a very kind and gentle and humble person. He really is.
Yeah. Those who read him know that is true. John, thanks for coming out tonight. You might have some other colleagues here, but your parents are here tonight.
They are.
Wave to the crowd, the McQuarries. Where are you? Just give a little wave. In all seriousness, Kristen, it is working on the Tribune Editorial Board is one of the great jobs in America, one of the great papers in the history of the country. And your background is kind of interesting. You and I always like to joke because people see us in this amazingly lucky place we are both in, and they assume that we're suffering from white privilege or something. But you were born in Rockford and crawled your way and demanded your way to get a seat at that table. Tell me a little bit about that process and what that's like.
I don't want to sound like I'm flawed anyway, but...
No, that's what you said at the bar last time we were together. You said I had to crawl over people to get here. I think this is great.
No, I find
Maybe I might remember that wrong.
I find it amusing sometimes that people think that, I came from this big life of privilege or something. And that is not to say that my parents didn't work very hard to put three of us through college. I have two sisters. But they had to remortgage the home every time they did it. We worked about town. I did this little stint where I was a shared reporter for public radio and the news cooperative. And so when I got a call from Bruce Dole, the editorial page editor, that they had been reading me and they wanted me to interview for a spot, I thought, like, oh, come on, this can't be real. But there I am today, Illinois State University grad, Redbird, sitting around a table with Medill, Harvard, you know, just some really talented.
And you're the one that generally makes the most sense.
I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room, but I am proud of where I came from.
Well, you should be, and I think it's a tremendous accomplishment. I think you should. People ask me all the time from all over the country, why is Illinois the way it is? Why are we so profit? Why is this so different from other places? I mean, it is different. You know, there are a few other places that give us a little run for our money, New Jersey and Louisiana historically, but really Illinois is in a class by itself in terms of not just the illegal corruption, but the legal corruption. I mean, the entire dynamic of what's going on in the state is legal corruption. Why is Illinois this way, and what do we do to fix it?
I mean, how long do we have?
I'm pretty awake. How about you guys? I got all night.
I mean, part of it is that we as voters and citizens of the state are so desensitized to corruption that we don't even blink an eye when 2 months ago the Tribune's Ray Long had an awesome story about how Mike Madigan set aside $7 million in Jesse White's budget, the Secretary of State's budget, in order to build a new school in his district. There are overcrowded schools, public schools, all over Chicago where kids are learning in closets, and even Rom refers to that as part of his budget. No uproar, no backlash. All those other schools and all those other legislators who have projects waiting in long lines for state money, not a word. So I have to think that we have become so accustomed to, like, this is the way it works, that we don't get as worked up as other states. And then we are different in the sense that we have had a Speaker of the House who's been there for 40 years, and he just knows the system. He knows the rules. He has single-handedly blocked, term limits, which voters support and they want to get on the ballot, redistricting, which is one of the most corrupt exercises that the legislature goes through. We've talked for years about combining the offices of treasurer and comptroller. That's a bill in the legislature that has been sitting in his Rules Committee with 75 sponsors from both parties. There's no, requirement that he kick that bill out for a vote. So we've got like kind of this double vision going here, where we have a very powerful person, and then we have voters who were so used to it. We just kind of think it's normal behavior when it's.
I think they switch sometimes.
I think Madigan is Louis, and Cullerton is Tillman, right?
Everybody agree with that?
Right?
How many of you know the movie we're talking about? It's been a while. Yeah, everybody knows that movie, right? Go home and Netflix it. And yet they choose to do things that are harmful to the people on hand. People want to hear the real nature of politics and how it really works, how pressure is brought to bear, and why legislators go against this over and over.
Once you are elected, first of all, it's a pretty cool gig. You don't really want to lose it. So you sort of become aligned to not only what your constituents want, but what your donors want, what the special special interest groups want, what the speaker wants, because many of these candidates run that they're going to be independent of Mike Madigan. And almost instantly that becomes untrue. And that's something that I've spent a lot of time just trying to figure out what, you ran as this person and now you're this person. Well, after you are in, he protects you. He makes sure you don't have competition next time around. So if he clears the field for you, if Mike Casper, his lawyer, kicks somebody off the ballot for you, that's a huge gift, and you just get to coast to the next election. When you're down there, you actually need Mike Madigan's staff to advise you, to write your bills. In many cases, we were talking about 1229 earlier. The sponsor of that bill, when it came up on the floor, he needed Mike Madigan's staff person to answer almost every question for him that came up on the floor, as the Republicans were kind of lobbing questions over. So you become dependent on the apparatus.
Did everybody catch what she just said? Because it's actually fairly important. The guy who sponsored the bill had to have the speaker's staffer answer the questions on the bill he sponsored.
Yeah,
Very important thing to understand about the game.
This was the bill that was going to remove Rauner basically from the negotiating table if either side declared an impasse. So it was a very important piece of legislation. So I think all of these things combined, and then also, even when you're watching, who watches the live stream of the General Assembly every day besides me? I appreciate a few hands. I
know who you people are. Those who don't work at the Institute, please send me your resume right away.
But I watch their activities as much as I can. And it's all kind of theater. When the Republicans stand up and they oppose something, the Democrats are like, they're all kind of friends. They go out to dinner together. They do become sort of this clubby atmosphere. And it's very hard to, I think, maintain that independent voice, especially once you're down there, even if you ran on that platform.
So that was just really depressing. Tell everybody why, despite everything they just heard, they should have hope. And if you can't properly answer the question, then I will.
You answer it first, John.
No. This is between the lines of the Kristen McQueary.
Why you should have hope?
Yeah. Why? So why? How are we as a state, an engaged citizenry, going to overcome the corruption that you just described, and why good decisions are made to help all the people, and only the special interests seem to have a seat at the table?
I think because people are being converted and they're waking up every day. And I would even point to myself. I'm kind of a Democrat that the Democrats lost. And there were did I hear a gasp over there? I was once a Democrat.
They're not. The gasp was that they lost one.
There were different moments for me when I was a reporter covering the legislature where, I just believed that when the Illinois Education Association came down with buses of people and they had marches for equal education funding and more money for the classroom and everything, that was real. And it took me some time to realize that that's not real, that 95% of their resources are spent on benefits and pay for teachers, and the rest is just for show. Because if they wanted to change the school funding formula or do things to improve schools, it would have happened. They are that powerful. So those were some moments where I started to wake up. And then in 2004 and 5, when actually Governor Blagojevich had a pretty good pension modernization task force, that I was probably the only person who naively took it seriously, and started looking at the ramp payments that were approaching. And at the same time, legislators were introducing pension sweetener bills. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird, because here the governor has put out this, whole showing of how we can't afford this, and you still had some Republicans too introducing bills to make pensions richer. And then there was the tax increase of 2011 that they passed without reform, in the middle of the night during a lame duck session. And then there was a moment, I'm getting to the point of the question.
We're enjoying the ride to get there, don't we?
But, all of these things I think people are evolving toward. But there was a moment, and I can't remember if I was there or if I was watching it, but they were talking about Medicaid reform, which is a huge, Medicaid is going to be the next big it's going to slam us in the face even worse than pensions. And they finally came to the realization that they had to scrub the rolls, take people off of Medicaid. It was a super expensive program. And one of the things that they had to cut was dental services. And I just remember thinking, I interviewed a dentist. There weren't even many who took Medicaid. And he said, do you know how short-sighted that is? Because when people have a toothache and they don't have insurance, they wait till it gets really bad. Then they go to the emergency room. The emergency room pulls their teeth out, then their teeth collapse into each other. Then how easy is it to get a job when you have missing teeth? And it made me very sad to think, as a taxpayer, I'm willing to pay for dental insurance for poor working people. They should be able to go to the dentist. Our state is so messed up that we have to take that away from them. And so that's when there are moments like that where I just, done. Like we have to just go in a completely new direction. So
going back to the reason that we should have some hope, don't you think that there's now a pattern developing between the sustaining of the SB 1229 on the arbitration bill that just happened? Last year, Speaker Madigan was not able to do a supermajority for the millionaire's tax, for the progressive tax, and he wasn't able to get a simple majority to make the tax rate of 5% permanent, and therefore it ended up sunsetting partially sunsetting down to 375. 375, I'm forgetting. So he's had 4 very big losses. In addition to that, when Governor Rauner first came in, they had to make up about $1.5 billion in the budget for the then fiscal year to close the gap because of what Quinn and the Democrats did in the previous session. And Governor Rauner was largely able to do that on his terms. Can't you make the case that there's starting to be an erosion of Speaker Madigan's power and that his grip on power is actually much thinner than people realize? I mean, he's been out more than we've ever seen him, speaking, talking. He's dispensed his spokesman, ninja warrior Steve Brown, a number of times to counter some of the work we do and others.
You could make that argument, yes. I mean, when he lobbied hard for that millionaire's tax, and he was on the floor, and he didn't get it. But we are entering election season, and this is his moment of glory. Because Bruce Rauner actually has this huge pot of money that scares the living daylights out of Mike Madigan, I see the Democrats, they're almost coalescing more. They are tighter with the trial lawyers, they are tighter with unions because they need that money now more than they ever have. And so now is the point where people will kind of realign themselves with him. I mean, House seats come up every 2 years.
Okay, so I'm going to take issue with that. I don't think that's true. There are a number of Democrats who have resigned in safe seats who are not continuing. I think there's 4 so far. But that's usually a sign that they feel that their leadership position is weakening, not strengthening.
I mean, I'm sure each resignation has its own story. I don't know that I could.
Yes, but I'm recognizing a pattern, and I always look for something to make me happy.
Okay, John.
And I should say at this point in the conversation that, of course, the Illinois Policy Institute is nonpartisan. Most people don't understand what that means. It's a legal term of art with the IRS. Nonpartisan means that we cannot do electioneering. The Illinois Policy Institute cannot get involved in trying to help a Republican, a Democrat, a Libertarian, or whatever you like, your slice of the pie, elected. We, however, can absolutely be ideological, just like there are think tanks that are left of center. There are think tanks that are right of center, and we are pro-free market, pro-liberty. Getting back to why people get involved, I got involved because I was so fed up with big spending, big government Republicans. They sort of left me behind, and that's why I got involved. And so both parties, in their own way, are corrupt. For us, it's about the policy. So I just thought I'd share that in terms of what the Institute does. As Citizen John, I get involved in some political stuff here and there, which people who pay attention know about. So I think that the politics are interesting. One of the things I always like to say, if you care about public policy, you have to care about politics. And if you care about politics, because that's where public policy is adopted, you have to care about the war and culture for these ideas. And the Tribune editorial page is an important part of that because you're talking to the engaged voter. It's really evolved, the Tribune editorial page, over the last few years, and really under Bruce's leadership. And by the way, I did want to say earlier, I think this shows and I don't know Bruce well, but it shows, I don't know if he might even be here tonight, I don't know if he is. I think his visionary thinking to bring you in with you brought in a very different point of view to that page than what was there previously. And I think you've opened up a whole new audience that had abandoned that paper for a long time. Have you noticed that? Are you self-aware of that?
No. I think the page...
Don't you all agree? Do you read
right.
Yeah.
I think...
Is Bruce here tonight? Because I think now's a good time to ask for a raise.
I don't think so. Your $20 limit. He said he was going to throw spitballs at me, but I don't think he's here. I think the page has always been free market, always been smaller government.
That was clear with the 2 Obama endorsements. I mean, if you're going to tee me up, Kristen, I got to take it.
It's fair criticism. Fair criticism. Those are not unanimous votes.
Actually, that's a good topic. Explain to people how that works. So the editorial page comes out with a position, whether it's an endorsement or something else. Explain the process. How there's many of you in there, but it's not ideologically aligned. There's a bunch of different points of view. Some people write on some issues, some people write on other issues and represent the editorial. Explain how that works. I think most people don't realize that.
So there are 12 or 13 of us on the board. About 5 or 6 of us do the daily writing. The rest are many editors and like editors of the commentary page, which is kind of a little bit separate from the editorial page. But basically, we meet as a board. Well, Scott Stantis is on the board. He's
Where's
here,
Scott?
the editorial cartoonist.
Hey, Scott. Hey, Scott. Right, let's pause for another half a second, because Scott, you're doing some of the best work in editorial cartoons in the entire country. Really terrific stuff.
In the entire country, he is. I mean, really, he's the most talented person on the board, and I'm not exaggerating. And some of the things that he comes up with just...
Eric Zorn resents that.
Eric Zorn is actually not on the board.
That's why I said that.
He sits in our meetings, and he's a good point counterpart.
So how long has he been sitting in the meetings waiting to be invited, but he hasn't been?
Oh, no, he's in all of our meetings.
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Eric and I have a very good, fun back and forth occasionally, and he's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
He's wrong about everything, but he's a good guy.
I tell him the same thing. We meet Mondays and Thursdays, and really we just come with our own ideas. We go around the board and we say, you know, this is what I'm working on, this is what I want to write about, and then we kick it around. And sometimes it's kind of a knockdown, drag out. Sometimes it's, you know, 11 o'clock and we got to move on to the next thing. But you really come with your own ideas. There is no corporate agenda. There is no, you know, people have kind of lofty ideas that, you know, the richest people in the city run the editorial board, and it just couldn't be further from the truth. I come in with my own ideas, I present them, I defend them, and then I often end up writing them. So Bruce Stold is the editorial page editor. You don't end up writing on something that you don't believe in. You know, he would never ask me to write something that kind of I don't agree with. That doesn't mean that things don't show up on the page that I take issue with, because they do. We are a diverse board. We have liberal Democrats, we have libertarians, we have Republicans, we have independents, and that's the voice of the page.
And Steve Chapman, as the libertarian on the board, is probably always right.
I wouldn't say always right, but yes, he is the voice of reason.
Well, there you
voice
go.
of reason.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now, the other question I had for you is, did you wear the glasses tonight because you thought you looked smarter?
I do look smarter. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I wore them to look smarter.
I can't remember.
Do I look smarter?
You always look smart to me, but
Okay.
and when I
never
say
seen
that,
me with my glasses?
I've never seen you with your glasses.
Oh, okay. Well, here you go.
I think it's an excellent choice. It's too bad your parents didn't get you eye care as a child. Speaking of the Tribune's perception and some as sort of a corporate shill, people have said that since you came from Rockford, the Daily Southtown, you were sort of that hard-bitten, curious reporter, and now you've gone corporate, is what some of your critics say. In fact, there's a really horrible hashtag about you. Do you want to share people with that?
No,
Okay.
I don't want to say it out loud.
Google that.
There are
We'll
so
find it
many.
out.
One of them.
So you do have critics.
Oh, many.
What's it like to have your name out there every day and have people say really horrible things about you? Because I've read a lot of it, and some of it is very terrible. And by the way, I've only read the stuff I wrote. I'm kidding. I never write that stuff.
I read a lot of stuff about you, too. I mean, I think we're like kindred. I don't know who has... I think I'm winning in terms of, like, terrible remarks on liberal blogs, but we're close sometimes.
We're very close. It's very
me.
fun. It's very fun.
What's it like? It stinks. I don't like it at all. But, you know, they're giving me space in a major newspaper to say what I think, and so I'm not going to write a column that says, well, this person says this, and this person says this, and we'll just see what happens. I mean, you're giving me space in the paper. I'm going to say something. And I write opinion, and I'm going to write with conviction. And if you don't like it, sorry.
What's your favorite part about your job, besides tonight?
The Heineken is definitely the highlight of the night.
Wait a minute. You haven't had much of that. That's pretty...
What I have to say, if you really wanted to hit Southside Irish, it would have been a can of Busch Light. I appreciate the gesture.
Actually, Heather, my colleague, ran within 3 blocks here looking for a can.
Oh,
and she
that's so
find
nice.
It.
So you got,
so,
you understand. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
I made that up, but if she knew it, she would have.
You get this, my south side. What was your question?
What's your favorite part about your job besides being here on the stage at this moment?
Right. I mean, it's just a great job. I get to go into work every day, and sometimes we have, the ambassador to Chile in, and sometimes we have the mayor in, as he was in Tuesday. It's just very intellectually stimulating, and I love to talk about things like property taxes and the classification system, and we talk about the Iran nuclear deal. We did repeatedly. So
it's lucky you met and married your husband Matt before this all started in your life, right?
Because I'm such a nerd.
I mean, really, most men, that's not,
It's not exciting stuff.
No,
that's true. No, I don't take my work home with me.
That's very smart. I think he appreciates that.
I'm sure. Oh my goodness, yes.
How many kids do you have?
2.
How old are they?
8 and 9.
And didn't you recently have a basketball game or some sort of game that you went to?
I did. My daughter at last night's basketball game got her first basket.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
She had been working out on the driveway, and she was losing all of her confidence, and so it was a good night.
That is awesome. That is great. And I'm sure it won't be the last. There'll be many more to come.
I hope not.
What's the worst part about your job besides the vitriolic hatred of your incisive commentary?
Well, that's definitely number one. I mean, there aren't any really other terrible parts of my job. I'm very blessed and honored to be a part of the Tribune Editorial Board, and I wish we had a few more resources so that I could...
So you wish these people here would do more paid subscriptions?
Yes.
So you guys all know how you can help Kristen out?
No,
now?
I just, I would like to... We are a big school choice page. I would love to spend a week in New Orleans, seeing what they've done with school choice and other parts of the country, but, budgets are tight, and so that's my only issue.
That's interesting. And tell people a little bit about what it's like to have explain a little bit how it works when you go through the candidate interviewing process, and sort of the grind of it as well as the sort of interest of it, and then how the endorsement process works.
So we endorse in every race, basically. Judges,
and
Metropolitan Water District. I
Right.
mean, if you have any questions over sewage and how it's being removed and taken from your house,
Well, we all have questions.
we're your group. So we send out questionnaires. We bring in key races, and then most of the rest I do over the phone. And it is, I mean, it's a months-long process where I'm kind of pulled off the editorial page and doing just endorsements. But I really consider that just such a critical thing that newspapers do. I know a lot of people think endorsements don't matter, and maybe they don't. In tight races, they definitely do. But you are at least getting someone who is seeing these candidates up close and trying to give you a choice, and trying to kind of weed through all of the crap that you get in the mail. And I find that to be kind of rewarding and necessary, and the role of journalism. So. And
who do you think is the best public policy think tank in the country?
I was told this question was coming at like 7:20. So are we on?
It's early. We want plenty of time to really dig into this one deeply.
Yes. Well, we're aligned. I mean, the editorial page and the Policy Institute are just kind of naturally aligned on a lot of issues, and you do great work. Today, I was getting all kinds of email about the food truck issue, food carts in particular, which happened today. The Institute has done great work in moving that issue along.
Yes, you should all... This is a good time for, first of all, we have several of our board members here. Art is here, Ed is here, Steve, I think you're here. Raise your hand so people can see a couple of our very brave board members. And part of the reason... Our board members also take some abuse from the people on the left who don't like when we speak the truth. And I have a courageous board, and I'm very grateful for them. And then everybody that works at the Institute, just raise your hand. There's a lot of some great people. I think we're going to open it up to your questions in a moment. I had a nice prepared list, most of which I didn't even touch. But it's kind of, I don't want to. All right, I'm not going to do that one. That's probably inappropriate. Your parents are here after all. I can't do that one because that's also inappropriate with your parents here. All right, I think we're good with that. I'm just kidding, Mr. and Mrs. McQueary. All right, we're going to open it up for questions from you. Now, where's our Judy? Where are you? Well, there you are, over there, on my right where I like to keep you. So let's here's what we're going to do, because I want to try to make sure, and I always try to say this, we're looking for a question that has a question mark at the end, not an exclamation point or a period. We're not looking for a riff on public policy. We're looking for you to take advantage of the amazing awesomeness that is Kristen McQueary and ask her the question you've always wanted to ask, succinctly, so we can get many of them. Mark?
My name is Mark Callender, and I ran for state rep last year, and you interviewed me. The question is coming.
Yeah, I feel it. I can feel it.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of yours. I got the endorsement, so I appreciate it. I've always wondered, though, given that how hard it is to run and what we were trying to accomplish, which was no small task, and we had a door hanger that had Madigan's face on one side and mine on the other, everybody recognized him as the linchpin to our issues, right? What would it take? I mean, if I was Mr. Tribune tomorrow, I would do a full cover, in-depth article about how corrupt he is, the ties, everything that he touches, and why he is the center of the problems in the state. What would it take for this to be like, I don't know, a major issue on the front of the paper for who knows how many weeks?
All right,
I'm just curious.
That was a question. There we go. Have fun with that one.
No, I mean,
it's a great question.
It is. Maybe it's not showing up every day, but we're doing it. And let me just run through some of them. I mean, for years, we wrote about pork projects that he was securing and how he was in a meeting with people and said, like, that's my money. We did a whole series on how his law firm and his property tax law firm gets business based on his connections in the legislature. We did a whole summer on the Metra scandal and how, you know, part of why he's so powerful is he has all these connections and he gets jobs for people and he gets jobs for people's kids. That was in there. We had a whole series on his son and how he is now selling insurance in all of these communities that also rely on Speaker Madigan for stuff. We wrote about his school. We write about his funders. That's what I mean when I say, like, there's just such a desensitization among voters, because really there's nothing about Mike Madigan that we aren't doggedly covering all the time, and it doesn't register. I mean, even the Illinois Republican Party did a whole Fire Mike Madigan campaign and hoped that it would have some traction. I think it has some, but people will still vote for their Democratic local state legislator because they like them and they know them, and they sort of separate the fact that that person votes for Mike Madigan for state.
So thank you, Kristen, for that answer. I'm going to add a little to that. First of all, I would agree that the Tribune has absolutely been far and away the most consistent critic, exposer, truth teller about Mike Madigan for a long time. But it's on the editorial page. They don't do that on the news pages. The news operation is a different thing altogether, and I would certainly offer some constructive criticism if I was allowed to do that with some of those people who write there. Interpret that how you think you should. But beyond that, Speaker Madigan has largely been in power 32 of the last 34 years as Speaker. And during that time, with all due respect to the people I'm about to mention, Thompson, Edgar, and Ryan were partners with Speaker Madigan in how the things operated. And then he had a dysfunctional two Democrats in a row who were dysfunctional, didn't understand how the partnership worked. And during all of that time, he had about a 3 to 4 to 1 financial advantage in all of these races that Kristen is referring to. The table is completely different. He now has a person in the governor's seat who does not want to be a partner. In fact, he wants to take the game board away of monopoly from Speaker Madigan and wants to play a different game. And he is going to have not just funding parity, but the Republican side with Governor Rauner's fundraising prowess is going to at least have a 1-to-1, if not a 150 to 200% spending advantage. So I will tell you, I believe that things are going to evolve fairly surprisingly over the next 4 to 6 years because it's a new era. And all this stuff we just got done hearing about and talking about so far tonight is because there was a monopoly, and that monopoly is now broken. And they don't get broken up and the power taken away overnight. It takes time. The Tribune's editorial page has been extremely courageous, I believe. We're going to come to the middle now for a question. Anybody right here in front? Hey, how are you? Oh, Okay, we'll come back to the middle then.
Okay, hi.
You got to be more assertive in the middle
I just
there.
have a quick question. What percentage of your readers go to the editorial page first and then read the newspaper? Do you have any
Zero.
data to that?
Zero. No. We don't necessarily get all that data. I think people pick up more of what we do on social media. I don't think people, I mean, you tell me, I don't think people go to the homepage and go to the opinion section. We're constantly trying to push out our material to bring attention to it, but there's a very big and strong division between the newsroom and the editorial board in the sense that we don't share information at all. We are opinion, they are news. They do not want to be affiliated with us, and I understand that. So I don't really know how many people read the editorial page first. I hope they do. You should.
My bet is that number is going to stun you when you learn what it is, because I'll bet a ton of people go to the opening page and then click either on John or the opinion section or the sports section before they read the news section. Because by the time most people are going to the site, they already know what's on the front page because they've heard it through so many other channels already. Facebook, Twitter, news alerts, and all the rest of it. There's very rarely anything on the front page of any news operation that I haven't already heard about in some fashion. I think you're going to be stunned by how many people go into one of those three places I just mentioned. In the middle, Steve Brown, since you're on the board, you're going to get a question. We'll come back. We have lots of time here unless you get restless, so we'll try to get to all of you.
What's the three biggest issues that you're passionate about right now, that you're writing about or plan to write about?
Now that, by the way, that is an example of a succinct, pointed question. And there's no surprise he's a member of the Illinois Policy Institute board.
Three things. Gosh, this is like almost embarrassing that I still get worked up about the same three things that I did probably 10 years ago. I mean, like Rom's budget. I spent the whole week reading it. It still really gets under my skin. I have a column that like I mentioned that's coming out about that. The stalemate in Springfield, I'm following all the time. I still have this really, I really believe in school choice. And even though that keeps getting set on the back burner, all of this upheaval with CPS, I keep thinking about how, you know, now there's a growing movement to have a charter school moratorium. We just seem to be getting farther and farther away from expanded school choice like many other states have, voucher programs, et cetera. So that's another one that kind of just really gets me worked up because I just think we're trapping so many kids in poor performing neighborhood schools, and we're closing good Catholic schools in some of these neighborhoods. We're not digging ourselves out from that problem, and I think it's terrible, really. So that's another one.
Judy, let's come to this gentleman right here who's been very patient. You're starting to stack some applause. Very good.
My name's Justin Williams. I've never run and I will never run for office. My question is, if all lives matter, Black Lives Matter, what's your policy on the war on drugs?
Is that for both of us? Or? Okay.
Would you like to go first?
I mean, what's my policy on the war on drugs? I think it's largely failed. I've been in favor of some of the movement in the General Assembly to ease up on some of the very, mandatory minimum sentencing requirements for small amounts of marijuana or what have you. I think medical marijuana made sense. In terms of, what was your second part of the question?
Just what's your sort of feeling on the war on drugs? I think that was the question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it worked. And so I think we are, if you look at Cook County's jail population and how much we're spending on people who are caught with small amounts of drugs, I am not opposed to trying to ease up some of those sentencing requirements.
I'll speak personally, not for the Institute. The war on drugs is one of the greatest colossal failures of government overreach and spending and intrusion in people's lives that has ever been perpetuated in this country. It is an utter failure. One of the reasons we launched our criminal justice reform, I don't think Bryant is here. Bryant, are you here? Bryant Jackson Green runs our criminal justice reform effort, which we launched earlier this year, and part of the reason we launched that is because of just the human tragedy of people for minor crimes, particularly drug offenses, where they're hurting no one but other than themselves, depending on what your view of this is, and they're being incarcerated and put in with hardened criminals, learning how to be a better criminal, and being caught up in the system, and then have a very difficult life thereafter. The way I look at this from a social science point of view is if you think about addiction, I have many friends who've had children who've gone through addiction. It is a very, very devastating thing. It is very hard. The real issue is how do you improve the human condition for the most in the most kind way? And today we are creating cities that are utter failures where the best job for a starting job for a kid on the South or West Side is to become a drug runner. And we're raising minimum wage and blocking them out of entry-level jobs. We're making it very hard to start a business in the city of Chicago. And sometimes the only way to provide any kind of income is to do that because of the war on drugs. It's just insanity. And so if you think about addiction, right now it may be a fairly small part of the population that has addiction problems, but the drug war and the situation permeates every aspect of society, even if you're not directly engaged. It permeates everywhere, everything. The war on drugs is just everywhere. But if you had a reform of all that, we didn't have a war on drugs and rather we had a war for rehabilitation and help for people, maybe the addiction, because there's easier access, goes up a little bit, but the negative impact on society as a whole would shrink dramatically, is what I believe would happen. And I think that's been proven elsewhere where it's been tried. Again, personal opinions. Over here. In the back.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Pahlke, and I'm running for U.S. Senate. I'm trying to get all my signatures together right now. But I've been doing a lot of audits in the suburbs. And what I'm discovering is we have a huge problem with our land and, of course, with the organization of some of our communities because we have a lot of townships, we've got villages, we've got cities. You know, there's a lot of unorganization as far as how the government is communicating with the constituents. So when companies like Mariano's, big-time developers, the unions come in and build these cities or towns, you've got like the city of Schaumburg. You know, we're kind of making a mess out of our land.
Let's get to the question, Liz.
Well, I think there's a difference between federal policy and state policy, and I've been one to bash Michael Madigan, but I can't really bash him on a lot of policies that are sometimes federal policies as well when we turn over our land from like the Glenview
Liz,
Naval Air
I'm a
Base.
very tough moderator. I love you.
Okay.
But I need a question, and I need it quickly.
Well, what is your policy for immigration, for permanent resident aliens, for the problem we have with Hispanics, and for how we're dealing with our land?
Well, I'll first of all say I don't think we have a problem with Hispanics. Then you can answer the question. Thank you. Go ahead.
I am not our point person on immigration reform on the editorial board, but we generally favor a path to, I'm not going to say amnesty because that was not what that bill was, but we favored the Gang of 8 bill that gave people a path to citizenship over the course of 11 to 12 years, required them to keep a job and not get welfare, and we have generally been proponents of immigration reform, and we thought that. And actually, John Boehner at one point also thought that was a good bill, but then he backed off of it. So that's been our editorial page position.
All right, thank you. No, we're going to move on from that topic, Liz. You had your chance. Thank you very much. Mark Weinmuller.
Never let me hold the microphone.
That is the rule. I told Judy that ahead of time, which is why she's gripping it like a death grip.
Oh, Mark Weinmuller, I want to know what we can do as conservatives in social media. I Googled you, and the first 50 searches are on your Katrina story.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how things can evolve, and you've written thousands of stories, and that's what comes up on you. So what can we do to get our message out more through social media, and is social media kind of going to overtake your print media?
Well, I'm not a good person to ask on how to slow down that social media, what happened after I wrote an article that was about the city of Chicago's finances, but it was a very jarring metaphor to use Katrina. I think you're doing a good job. I mean, I don't know what more conservatives can do. You're using the airwaves and social media and Facebook and Twitter, and you have organizations like this to get your message out. I don't know that there's any other recipe. Social media is kind of its own universe, and you can't really control what happens with it. But I think conservatives I think you're getting your message out more now than you ever have, I would say.
Well, you've become quite a presence, Mark, on social media. I love my, everybody.
I mean, you personally.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to come over here. Is Ryan Green here tonight? I don't think Ryan is here tonight. Ryan is our Vice President of Marketing, and he is an absolute genius on social media. When I hired him, he was the first Director of Digital in the movement, and he is now looked to for how you do market penetration. I'll just give you one simple example of how he does his magic. We had Mike Lucci. I don't know if Michael's here. Michael Lucci, where are you? You here somewhere? Anyway, he had a media hit on CBS 2 that evening. They had about 180,000 people tuned in. We have no idea if they were watching or not. Ryan took that media hit, did a bunch of work with our data platform and some other tools, and then put it out through social media, and I think over 600,000 people have now watched that media hit digitally through social media. So there's no question that that channel and the sub-channels within it are going to be the primary way that we connect with people as individuals and groups of individuals, and the legacy tools will just become the platforms from which you do this. Actually, I met this gentleman right here.
My name is Bill McDonald. The Tribune has done a wonderful job in finance, in Illinois finances, Chicago finances, and also in the pensions. One of the things you taught me, and just recently, is that Chicago teachers only put in 2% of their pensions for the last 28 years or so because they gave up an increase in salary in 1983. So 2%, not 9%, which they always say they put in. That was a wonderful fact. My question is, the pensions are a problem. People realize they're a problem. The way to change it is to change the pensions. Then they say, well, we can't because the judges say you can't change the Constitution. Why don't we change that clause in the Constitution? Is it that hard to do?
There you go. You have a question, Kristen.
It shouldn't be that hard to do. I think there is a question as to whether, even if you change the Constitution, whether you still have to grandfather in all these people whose, employment contracts were reached before you changed the Constitution. So I definitely think the legislature should have done that 7-8 years ago. The Constitution. To change the Constitution, the General Assembly could put it on the ballot for the next election cycle. We have really good election attorneys here, so they will correct me. But the General Assembly could do it. When they don't do that, then you have to do this whole citizen route that, like term limits and redistricting has done, where you have to collect a certain number of signatures, and it's extremely difficult.
Yeah, I happen to know just a little bit about this. The Illinois Constitution, in terms of the initiative process, citizen-generated initiative process, is extremely narrow, and it's almost impossible to do a constitutional fix on this issue through the initiative process by citizens collecting signatures. Really, the only way to do it is for the General Assembly to refer it out. You need a supermajority, if I recall correctly, to do that, and then it has to be a majority of those casting votes on that issue, I think is the way it works. But essentially 50%, some details there. I do think this has a shot down the road of getting on the ballot. I do agree, I think there's constitutional problems in terms of whether or not you grandfather people in that came in under the old constitutional rubric. The only way out of this problem, in my view, is there's several things that have to happen. This General Assembly should immediately pass a complete conversion to defined contribution for all new employees. That would show they're serious because you can do that. That is perfectly constitutional. That's the first step. The second step that's going to happen, in my view, if we don't do something else, where there's an accommodation, where there's an agreement, a reached agreement that passes constitutional muster, where there's a quid pro quo, that's a good one in this case, where they come to some accommodation where there's not a diminishment of benefits, but it solves the problem. The only other way out is to start never hiring another state worker. And there's no other choice. Diana Rickert, who is here, she writes a column about once a month in the Tribune, and she said this shortly after there she is, Diana's over there, one of our great talents, Vice President of Communications over there, and she has a regular column in the Tribune as well on the commentary page. And she pointed this out. Now, of course, she wasn't necessarily advocating that, but the point is that you have to reduce headcount. Every person you take, the average, just to take teachers as an example, the average teacher over a 30-year career in the state of Illinois puts in $133,000 and gets back $2.6 million. This is immoral on the backs of the working class and poor and all the citizens of the state. It is unsustainable. And the ratios are similar for other members of different unions. Let's go over here again for another question. Jean Barry, wait for the microphone, Jean.
I'm coming, Jean.
You do have you know how to project, Jean, and you're a fine golfer.
Minimum wage. is it possible that we can change the dialogue and call it a beginning wage, not a minimum wage? Because isn't that really where it's supposed to start? Is that everybody starts someplace? It's a beginning. It's not an end-all to be-all. It's not what everyone aspires to have for their whole life, but that we have a beginning wage that gives people an opportunity to get a job and then move ahead. Is there any way we can change the dialogue and getting away from minimum?
I will take that up with the Tribune copy editors. I mean, the editorial page, we tend to be a free markets page, so we did not support the hike in the minimum wage for the city of Chicago. We think it is kind of a dangerous precedent, especially for franchisees and small business owners, so we're probably simpatico on that.
Judy, where are you? There you are. Let's take this tall-looking gentleman here in the middle.
Hi, my name is Paul Liberty. My question is to both of you. What are your thoughts on the new Fair Map initiative, the effort now to hopefully end gerrymandering or change it quite a bit in Illinois?
I mean, I'd like to say that I'm hopeful, but once again, opponents have done what they did last time, where they get this whole group of opponents who are a diverse group of people, but people who owe Michael Madigan something. I think Elsie Higginbottom is again on the list of people who oppose any effort because they're basically spreading false information that a new map would somehow strip minorities of having minority representation. That's protected by the federal courts. I think there's a way to draw a fair map that does not, doesn't start with an incumbent's home and then figure out like where else they can get all their friends in their district and still protect minorities in the General Assembly. We all want to see that. So I have high hopes. They hired a more professional firm this time. John knows much more about this than I do. But I'm hopeful that they will not run into the same signature issues that they did last time. But I would again point out, even last time around, they made an honest effort, and it was Mike Madigan's chief election attorney, Mike Casper, who, when you have somebody like that challenging every single signature, and your signature that you signed outside of a Walmart has to match your signature on your voter card, it just makes it really tough even for an honest effort. So I hope it works this time.
Do you think the prescription is good, though? Let's pretend it's adopted. Is it a good prescription?
It's not. I would prefer to see a computerized version of redistricting, but anything is an improvement over what we have now.
I'm skeptical. Yeah, Steve, not yet. Michael Lotus. Oh, Mr. Mansky, we'll come to you next.
Hi, I'm Mike Lotus. Kristen, you were described as a former Democrat. We have a reform movement on the GOP side to try to break up what John Cass calls the combine. What is it going to take for what I will call the honest, decent, ordinary Democrats to stop supporting Madigan just because he has a D next to his name and try to take their own party back?
When we have, during this budget impasse and during when we wanted to see pension reform and all kinds of things, we have those conversations around the editorial board. Where are the pressure points? Who can we pressure? Who can we call out? And really, that's the group. Until Democrats, and there are quite a few reform-minded Democrats who at least get elected saying that they're not going to be in line, they have to start rising up. What is it going to take? I don't know. But if you want to put pressure on the General Assembly and try to force change, that's your pressure point. I have heard that there has been movement recently, even among the Black Caucus, where they're starting to kind of get the idea that this government is not necessarily serving them or serving their people. And they have started listening to Governor Rauner when he talks about enterprise zones and low-income neighborhoods and how some of his pro-business proposals might help. I mean, we're talking about places on the south side of Chicago that haven't had a business come there in 20 years. And you're going to automatically write off special enterprise zones or getting rid of prevailing wage in these areas that have been completely dry of economic development. I think you're seeing somewhat of an awakening, but that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple thoughts to that. I agree with all of that. The other thing that you should remember is that states don't flip overnight. Voters don't flip overnight. Voters evolve. In the gubernatorial election, approximately 241 Democrats voted for Senator Durbin, then voted for Governor Rauner. There are 118 House districts in the state of Illinois. There are 71 seats held by the Democrats. 20 of those seats that are held by Democrat, Governor Rauner won. In the Senate, there are a total of 59 senators, and of the, I'm forgetting the number right now that the Democrats have, 34 I think it is, 10 seats are held by Democrat, but Governor Rauner won. What's happening in those districts are that people are making a discerning decision. The real question is, will Governor Rauner's carrying those districts now move down ballot? And my prediction is you will begin to see that happen over time. I've looked at states all over the country that have changed from Democrat to Republican, from Republican to Democrat. It takes several cycles for it to work. And it takes resources, and it takes leadership. But all of the predicates that are necessary for that to happen are in place in the state of Illinois. So that is another note of optimism. Another one of our board members, who I forgot to mention earlier because he was on the far reaches of my peripheral vision.
You didn't turn your chair enough.
I didn't turn my chair enough. Well, I don't want to turn too far away from you.
Right. That would be weird.
Is Craig Mansky, who's also one of our courageous board members. Craig.
Kristen, what is your position on incentive programs like the EDGE program and their future here in Illinois?
Notice that the pattern of the board members, succinct with a question mark. I just love that.
There are a lot of pro-business conservatives who will defend EDGE as being one of the few programs that actually does have requirements in it. Will give you a tax incentive if you have X number of employees. But I've just soured on everything that the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity does. There are just too many cases of people getting loans, and there is absolutely no accountability. And oh, gee, it turns out we gave $5 million to someone who had just filed for bankruptcy. There's too much uncertainty with that flow of money. So,
are you suggesting the government might not be good at picking the winners and losers as a venture capital operator?
I mean,
can you say
listen,
so, Linda?
It's something that our editorial page still struggles with, because you are in this competitive game of, well, Indiana's doing it and Wisconsin is doing it, and you don't want to lose employers. You want to bring them, but I'm kind of a hardliner on that, where I don't think that in the end, in most cases, it helps taxpayers. And we have to just make a better case for businesses coming here, not by giving special handouts, but by, workers' comp reform, tort reform, just making it a more,
So Governor Rauner has done some reforms of DCEO. I think the guy that he has running it, Jim Schultz, is a very good man, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over time. I know that they want to stop the old way, and they want to start a new way. We will see how that goes over time. But I will tell you a quick story. One of my favorite moments ever in a press conference in the Blue Room in Springfield. So the Blue Room is where you have press conferences, where the governor does press conferences, and it's just like on TV. There's lights and the podium and all that sort of thing. And it's a number of years ago, and I got the question. We had put out an alternative budget, and the budget from the state taxpayers for DCO was roughly $500 million, and we zeroed it out. And one of the reporters said to me, we're horrible in job creation, and we really are struggling for jobs, and you've zeroed out the job-creating agency, DCEO. Why would you do that thing? And I said, well, since we're dead last in job creation, I think they should be fired on the merits. And it was one of the few times in your life where you actually came up with the right answer in the right time, but they thought that was very harsh of me. We're going to take one more question because my boss, Christina Rasmussen, our Executive Vice President. Christina, wave at everybody. Christina is up from Springfield. She's here usually down in Springfield fighting the good fight every day. And Vince Colbert, you're going to get the last question. We can all talk a little bit informally. I'm sorry I didn't get to you and all the others that you had your hands up. But when Christina says I have to ask one more question, that's important.
Well, thank you for entrusting me with the microphone in the last question. So, and I didn't have time to prepare a short question, so but I'm going to make this as short as possible. So, in a state with corruption and transparency issues, this whole question and idea and thing you spoke about regarding combining the controller's function, the accounting function, with the treasury function, which is a paying function, why is that such a good idea in Illinois?
A couple of reasons. One, lots of states do it. They have one financial office. Two, it would save about $12 million a year, which I know doesn't sound like a whole lot, but over time.
And 3, when they separated the offices, it was during a time of, somebody was running off with millions of dollars, but accounting principles and technology is just so different now where there's just, it would be almost impossible for somebody to be robbing the state like they were when the offices were separated. I've done some research into this. I don't see why, if other states are doing this, that we can't do it too. And it's not a paper office anymore where you're, writing paper checks and there's cash lying around. It's all automated. So I don't see why we can't do it.
So for those of you who are junkies on this sort of stuff, the financial condition of the state or the city, of course, you can go to our site, illinoispolicy.org. I believe we're currently selling a sign that says, I support Illinois taxpayers. If you go to our site, you can buy one of those. You know how you go around, you see, I'm a proud union home? Find this sign and put it right next to that sign. And let's start to have a little competition. And but if you're into this sort of thing, Mark Glennon is here. Mark, are you still over here somewhere? Did I see you earlier? Mark Glennon, where are you, Mark? Oh, you left? Mark left. Anyway, wirepoints.com is a great blog on this subject matter that Mark puts together, and I recommend you check it out and put it on your reading list. So, Kristen, this has gone, let's see what time it is. I have no idea what time it is.
I don't either.
Wow, this went
Everyone's
fast.
still awake for the
Everybody's
most
still
part,
awake,
I
so
think,
we'll all be milling about later on. But I do have to say that we thought this would be really fun to have you here, and you have demonstrated to everybody why you are such a great editorial writer. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I think the Tribune truly is lucky to have you, and you should immediately go in tomorrow morning and ask for a salary increase. And we can give them the video if they would like to see why it is warranted. And I know that John Cass, in keeping with the big contracts maybe Peyton Manning gives up a little money to keep the left tackle on board. I'm sure John would give over a little big to help you out. And just an idea, John, just an idea. And but anyway, I want to thank all of you for coming out. The questions tonight were just excellent. And our state is in an interesting place. And I think what is interesting as we roll into the 2016 cycle that I think all of you should give some thought to is state now. Maybe light purple, but it's a split government now. And we clearly have a different point of view on one side of the government versus the other side. And I think this is a very good thing. And I think what we see in the communications that we and the engagement we have with our audiences is people are more optimistic than they've ever been. I gave a talk down in Southern Illinois recently, and I asked the following question, which I ask when I go around the state. How many of you think the course of our state is going to be forever in decline because of the power of Chicago and Cook County? Let me ask all of you. How many of you think that is true? Right. So 5 years ago, if I asked that question, every hand would have gone up. Every hand would have gone up. And fewer hands are going up because there is a weakening. And there's some information I have access to through some research we do that's not public yet. But I can tell you, generally speaking, that Democrat voters are moving. Independent voters are moving. They are very aware, in a way that is very uncommon across the country, who Mike Madigan is, who John Cullerton is, and what they're accountable for, in a way they never have been before. And they're unhappy. Democrat voters are unhappy with Democrat leaders. Independent voters are unhappy with Democrat leaders. Now, generally, the electorate as a whole is unhappy with the political class. So there's some muting of that. But the point is, we are getting market penetration of the truth. And that is why I am optimistic that we will eventually turn the corner and see Illinois rising. And our work as part of all of this is only possible because of the support you all provide, and I just want to say that we're very grateful for that, and thank you. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and thank you for coming out tonight. Well, give me 1 second. Let me turn this off.